Well, on behalf of the family and friends of Ruth Lenz, thank you for joining us here this afternoon as we remember and, yes, grieve, but also celebrate the life of 101 beautiful years. So as part of this program, we picked out two songs, a family that were meaningful for Ruth. You probably know both of them. The first song we're going to invite us to sing together is How Great Thou Art. So I want to invite you to rise in body or spirit and join us as we sing this hymn together.
Our first reading for today comes from the book of 1 Corinthians, the 13th chapter. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoings, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of these is love. And a second reading from Psalm 121. I lift my eyes up to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. He who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is the shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time on and forevermore. Here ends the readings.
Thank you all for joining us today and sharing in the celebration of life for Grandma, as we knew her. Grandma was amazing. She exuded joy throughout her life and was an inspiration to everyone who was able and lucky enough to meet her. We want to take just a second to share some quick words that, while giving Grandma's affection for music, might be in harmony with your experience of her. Growing up, every Sunday, Grandma would swing by our house in her white Oldsmobile with the most comfortable scarlet velour seats and whisk us to church, and specifically Sunday school. It was in this very sanctuary, marching around and singing, "Father Abraham had many sons," that my faith life started. Contrary to this picture, I actually liked church. And it was Grandma who introduced me to my faith and was, is, and will always be a saint to me. I find it appropriate that my wife just recently read one of the scriptures of 1 Corinthians, because in my experience, my grandma was the living personification of love. She was patient and kind. She was slow to anger, even when babysitting me and my brothers, which would have caused anyone to snap. She was full of joy and put others before herself. She did not boast. In fact, if she did boast, it was probably about her grandchildren, so I apologize for that. Her pride in me and Alex, Brad, and Karis might have been one of her few shortcomings. Grandma made those around her better because she always saw the best in others. She was the biggest supporter and cheerleader for those that she cared about. I'll never forget how her face would light up when she saw you for the first time in a while. Her smile would have a glow to it. After spending time with Grandma, you could feel better. She would naturally lift your spirit. When reflecting on my time with Grandma, the overwhelming memory was how she made me feel when I was with her. She made me feel loved. It was through watching my grandma live her faith, or live her life, that I learned how to live out my own faith. Grandma would effortlessly put others before herself. When I was young, she and I sponsored a child from Africa, with her money, of course. And when she would receive a mailing from World Vision, we would sit at her dining table and write a note back. She helped me to begin to see a wider world and understand how lucky I was to be born to this family and to the opportunities and where I was to be born. It was only because of her and the faith that she introduced me to that I would have been put in a place to be able to meet my wife, who is a Lutheran pastor. And for that, I will be forever thankful. Heaven just got a new angel. And with Grandma's passing, it is up to the rest of us to carry on her positivity, her passion for life, and her love. I know that Grandma is enjoying singing in the choir and being reunited with her husband. For as 1 Corinthians states, love never ends.
When deciding what to say about my grandma today, I kept reliving memories of my childhood with her. In spending time with those memories, I came to realize that I wasn't jumping to the big, grand events in our lives, but it was instead focusing on the smaller, day-to-day moments. As kids, she would often take us to the post office with her, and afterwards we would just watch prairie dogs popping up and scurrying around in the undeveloped fields to the east. She would drive us out to the airport just to watch the planes take off and land. At Christmas, she would drive us around town to look at all the houses decorated in Christmas lights. All the while, we would sit in the back seat, as described by Chris very well, gazing out the window. And if we asked properly, we would even get a lemon drop. She was our chauffeur, our tour guide, our camp counselor, our teacher. We all have memories of time spent with her, not all of them especially noteworthy. But to be with her enough was to realize that she had a special ability to make the mundane memorable. Through the gift of her time and her loving, sincere attention, she could always make your day better. In the last few years especially, spending time with our grandma most likely meant playing some Scrabble. Scrabble was the best way to spend time with her, especially as conversation was more difficult due to hearing loss and unreliable hearing aids. We could sit together and play for hours. She couldn't always hear us, but she was content to sit in our company, smiling. And she kept her Scrabble skills honed right up to the end. In what would, I'm sorry. Yeah. In what would turn out to be my last game with her, I couldn't even start to rotate the boards toward her for her turn before she would reach out across and start playing her word. I will forever be grateful for those games. I know one lesson that I will take from her life and put towards my own is to cherish the small moments in the company of loved ones and to be the kind of person who wears a smile even when you can't hear the conversation. Thank you.
My grandma, the superhero. This is not the it's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman situation. And that's because there was no mistaking Ruth Lenz. Everyone in this town knew my grandma. Out of all the different superpowers our grandma possessed, it was her positive attitude, supportive nature, and her strength that I reflect on most. Her ability to be positive was contagious, and she remained so throughout all life events. When she was stuck on a plane, sick, or in the hospital, Grandma could always be seen with a smile. After she had a fall a few years back, Grandma had to recover from a broken hip in a PT facility in Carbondale. When we came to visit, we were concerned about how she'd be feeling because she was away from her home and community and would have to stay for over 3 months. But when we arrived, she was smiling ear to ear and could not stop talking about all the great friends she had met. Each hall we toured, she could not wait to introduce us to the many neighbors she had already befriended. Her Christmas gifts that year was wine glasses so that she could enjoy happy hour with her new friends. Many people would feel isolated in this environment, far from home, but Grandma saw her stay as a chance to enjoy her new friends. Another superpower was Grandma's ability to support her friends and family. Each day, Grandma would sit down and underline, circle, and cut out newspaper articles of everybody in this room. Whether it was a career achievement, birthday, or a community growing by a new baby being born, she would happily post it proudly on her fridge for everyone to see when they came over. There was nothing Grandma loved more than being a member of this community. And finally, Grandma's strength is the superpower I reflect on most. Her strength to always remain happy through life is truly inspiring. From losing the ability to drive to losing her ability to walk unassisted, Grandma moved gracefully through each new phase of life. An example of this strength was on display this past Christmas. On her way inside her house, she tripped and took a slow fall. As we came running to see if she was okay with the fear in the air, we were met with her grandma saying, "Ooh, it's so good to see you guys," as she pulled us down to the floor for a hug. Being happy takes strength, and she was the strongest of them all. And up until the end, when she was unable to pick herself up, she would still use those rare superpowers to pick up everyone else when we needed it most.
Tough act to follow. By way of introduction, my name is Cynthia Sibley, and I'm the lay leader here at the United Methodist Church of Eagle Valley. Oh, Nancy. I really feel honored that you asked me to speak on behalf of our congregation, and though she deeply loved each and every one of you, she loved us too. She made us feel like we were her family and she was ours, and we deeply missed her. Once COVID came and she kind of disappeared into her apartment, and we weren't able to see her on a regular basis, but we knew she was there, and we did have visits with her. So, she was still really a part of our community. But I want to tell you a couple stories about her. First of all, we knew how much her faith was important to her, and she was such an encourager. And everything that you guys said, I'm like, okay, don't talk about that, don't talk about that. But the word cheerleader definitely came to mind. She had an enthusiasm and an exuberance for her faith and for her friends and her family, and we felt that. We saw those newspaper articles, and we heard about all of you. And Karis, I don't know if you remember, but we remember you. And and so all of the things that her family was doing and your achievements, we shared in those with her as well. And she shared in our family's achievements. She always seemed to know what was going on and who was in a play or who had made a touchdown, or she wanted to share in those things with us too. So cheerleader really does, define her. She was always so youthful. I mean, look at that picture right there. I mean, when you think about her as she was aging, we still thought she was like this invincible Ruth Lenz, who was our friend, who was always smiling and, bringing about that love and devotion that she had. We all felt valued by her. And in our church, we have something that we say when we become members of the church, that we pledge our prayers, our presence, our gifts, and our service. And Ruth did all of those things to the nth degree. I mean, she was always here to support us, whatever it was. If she could help physically, she did. If she could help financially, she was doing that. We know that she was praying for us, and she was here all the time. In fact, I need to point out to you, this second pew right here, that's where she would sit with her friends. And I think it was when Sid Spain, and maybe it was Pete Meese, was our pastor at the time, we had a group of ladies that would sit there, and we affectionately called them the Wild Bunch. And they were very instrumental in doing things in our community and being a part of the wider world, but also were a driving force for our congregation. Now, not all of them had wonderful things to say about the things that we were doing in the church, and we would oftentimes find out about what we might not be doing right. But Ruth was always one that was giving us a pat on the back and telling us about the things that we were doing successfully, and would always encourage us in those things. So I find it ironic that not a single person sat in that pew. I mean, there's to the Wild Bunch. We knew things about her, like she liked sweets and red wine. We knew that she loved Scrabble. I also know that she had this deep love for whenever we would do anything with the children and youth, and in particular the youth. And I think that, she was seeing her grandkids grow up and how important those times might be for them. And there were a few years where we kind of had a lull where we didn't have anybody doing youth, and we started up a youth group. And it's not often as an adult that someone stands up publicly and tells everyone how proud they are of you. But she did that to the people that were working in the youth group, and she stood up and named us and said how proud she was that, we would kind of take the mantle and try to organize a youth group. And she also said that she really felt at the heart of that a church, to be a real church, you had to be sure to minister to your youth. So I always remember that about her. There was another time when we nominated her for an award called the Quiet Disciple. And for those of you that are members of the Methodist Church, you might know about this award. And in 2009, Sid Spain and I had a conversation. Was there anyone in our congregation that we thought fit the description of a quiet disciple? And Ruth's name easily came to mind. And so we wrote up a letter of nomination and we sent it in. And at that time, our district was Western Colorado and all of Utah. And churches were able to nominate people in their congregation for a lifetime achievement. This is someone who had, really dedicated themselves and given to the church. And so we knew that, in our hearts, man, she should win, right? And they don't do it this way anymore, but at the time they used to take all those nominations from the different churches, and despite it being Utah, there are a lot of Methodist churches there. And so we found out that Ruth won. And so we wanted to have her come to the award meeting and have it be a surprise. So we had to figure out a way to get her there. Her good friend Bernice White was in the hospital and had heart surgery, and Bernice was in Grand Junction in the hospital there. So we said to Ruth, hey, you know what? We have this meeting to go to, and but afterwards or before, we could take you to see Bernice. And she was like, oh, yeah, great, And we had thought if she didn't agree to it, we would be calling Nancy and having her help us figure out how to do that. And so we get to the meeting, and we're sorry you have to sit through this meeting, which some of us in leadership don't. The meetings are necessary. But before you know it, she was introducing herself to everyone, and I would go to try to make a connection, and they'd say, oh, you're from Ruth's church. And I'd be like, yeah, okay. And so we're finally sitting at the presentation, and they start to read about her. Well, she looks at me, and she's like, I do that. And then she went, I think, well, that's kind of me, isn't it? And I went, and so as it continued on, when she found out that she had won the award, it was as if she had won Miss America. She got up and she walked down that aisle and she was waving. And she couldn't have been more proud to have received that award, which was very, very well deserved, and we were thrilled to be there with her. Most people don't make a speech after they are recognized for something like that, but she did. And that was before the time of live stream and everything, so we never got it, recorded. But she did grab that mic, and she gave a little speech and told people about our church, and once again was our greatest cheerleader. And everything of her came from the heart. Recently, someone said to me, when you're 101, you kind of know the end game. You know that something's going to happen someday, right? And we all know that. But I don't like to think of it as an end game, and I don't think Ruth would either. I think she would think that it was a great new beginning. So, thank you.
It's always so fun to hear stories about somebody's life. I'm going to invite you to pause for just a couple moments, maybe take a look around at the people that are in this room. If you're here today, you're here because you were touched by the life of Ruth. And there is great things about living to be 101. And one of those things is you outlive a lot of your friends. And as Cynthia said, I imagine not only are those here, but the Christian scriptures talk about being surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. So I imagine many, many more gathered here today who have since transitioned into what I might call the next life. And they're also joining us here as we celebrate and remember and grieve. And I'm getting all teary-eyed, and I'm the pastor. I'm supposed to be the one keeping it all together. She did rag on her grandsons, huh? And they're intimidating. Did you see all three of them up here together? One of the most accurate ways, I think, to know somebody is to see the lives of the people they touched. And we look around, we see that, and the lives of the family. So their stories teach us about Ruth. I was handed a few documents, and one of them is a short one-page biography of Ruth's life. 101 years, captured right here. This is like pastor's gold right here. I'm not going to speak very long, but I wanted to invite us to pause to reflect on her life in the words of Ruth. In the dark ages, she writes, of 1923, February 7th to be exact, I came upon the scene in Chicago, Illinois. Ruth Beverly Payne, the first and only child born to my parents. It was not a lonely existence. However, as I grew up with many friends, cousins, aunts, and uncles, as well as grandparents, the Great Depression dominated much of our lives. Mom, Dad, and I, with Dad's brother, his wife, and daughter, and Grandma Payne, all moved in. We avoided paying rent that way for several years. Money was practically non-existent as banks failed, resulting in the loss of many people's life savings. My last 2 years of high school were in a commercial school in downtown Chicago where I studied typing, shorthand and accounting, and all about the business world. My entry into the job market was with Illinois Bell Telephone Company. It paid $60 per month. The following year, I switched to a steno position with a law firm. No payroll deductions in that era, and I loved the crisp $20 bill I was paid every week. I just imagine her, just big smile. During World War II, I married my neighborhood sweetheart, Bill Lenz, and I accompanied him to several spots in the U.S. with the Air Force. We loved being Southerners in Shreveport, Louisiana. A move to Memphis came in 1966. We're in 1967. It was a tragic one for our family, as Bill was killed in a plane accident on a business trip, returning from Camden, Arkansas. Nancy was in 11th grade, David in 9th. I continued to live and work in Memphis after the kids left for college until I called from Nancy in Eagle, Colorado. Mom, I'm going to have twins, and I need help, at least for a year. Once again, the direction of my life changed as, with little hesitation, I replied, if I'm coming for a year, I'm going to move there. Retired from my job, I sold my house, arrived one day before Alex and Brad put in their appearance. I have loved my life here with family and friends. The twins have a big brother, Chris, and David and Dusty have my Karis as well as Greg, Nikki, and Crystal from Dusty's former marriage. All are precious to me. And in the spring, I'll be a great grandma when Craig and Sarah's little one arrives. My life, she writes, has included traveling abroad 4 times and many lovely trips in our great country. The church and senior activities, along with my 4 exercise classes. I love how she included that. Important stuff, right? And I don't know how to say this. Is it Red Hatters? Red Hatters have enriched, I should probably figure that out before I'm up in front. Enriched my golden years so much, bringing fun times and valued friendships. And she ends with this phrase, God has blessed me and my family more than we could ever have imagined. It's on your bulletin. In the last page there, her quote, "God has blessed me and my family more than we could have ever have imagined." Isn't that phrase what we all hope to say at the end of our life? These are meaningful times to kind of ceremonially remember, but also to remind ourselves of what matters in our own life. To focus on what David Brooks called eulogy virtues and not just resume virtues. To remind ourselves who matters and who's important, and to look and ask ourselves, are we putting energy into what really matters? Because if you're like me, from time to time, you get distracted. Ruth's life wasn't necessarily an easy one if you look at her life, was it? Despite this, she found a way through the difficult seasons that life presented her. It reminds me of the following quote: "It's your reaction to adversity, not adversity itself, that determines how your life story will develop." In preparing for this service, I met with Nancy and her son, Chris, and I found out Chris's wife, Rebecca, is a pastor as well. And she made in passing this sort of parallel noticing the Ruth Lenz and another Ruth found in the Hebrew Scriptures. And as I thought about this, I thought, that is brilliant. In the Hebrew Scriptures, the biblical Ruth also lost her husband. The biblical Ruth also took it upon herself, after experiencing great loss, to give of herself to take care of family. Both of them navigated some difficult seasons, but found the courage and the strength to move forward. As Reverend Rebecca read from the Scripture Psalms, Ruth's life reflects and echoes the psalmist. "I look up to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord who made the heaven and the earth." Ruth, if you knew her, was a woman of faith. And her faith gave her strength to overcome the adversities of her life. I didn't have the opportunity to meet Ruth personally until the last year of her life. She was the first person I ever got to celebrate 101 years together. What struck me immediately, as Nancy introduced me into her house, was, I forget the words Chris used exactly, but her radiating smile. To know Ruth was to know that radiating smile. Mother Teresa once said, "A joyful heart is the inevitable result of a heart burning with love." While Ruth's faith carried her through difficult times, her faith was also reflected into the world through the love that she carried for her family and for her church community. You don't win the quiet disciple if that's not true. And for everybody else that she came in contact with. Joy was one of the words that rose to the top of my mind. I'm going to do something maybe a little unconventional, which I always like to do. But I'm going to pause for a couple of moments. Joy was one word that came to my mind, but in this space here and now, as part of our remembering, what word comes to your mind? We're going to take a couple of moments. I'm going to invite all you extroverts to step up to the ball first and speak that word out loud. What word comes to your mind when you think of the life of Ruth Lenz? I'm going to invite you to speak it out now. Fun. Present. Remarkable. Love. Wisdom. Pure love. Smart.
As a son-in-law, very, very lucky.
Kind. I can echo that. A couple more moments. Any words that come to your mind? Grace. Positivity, focused. Generous. Best friend. Forgiving. We take a moment to just reflect on those beautiful words, on her life, the way she touched everyone here. As we come to the end of this time, in a couple moments we're going to invite you to head on downstairs and continue to swap stories and continue to remember her life and the way she touched you. If you're here and Ruth's life impacted you, I'm going to invite you to stand with me right now. I think it's moments like these where we remember the life of someone special. We're invited to remember why Ruth's life was so special. And we pause to also be reminded that a piece of her continues with each person here, especially those who are her family. That your family carry her with you and will forever for the rest of your life. I invite you to join me. It's a classic song. It's a beautiful song. If you know it, please sing it out loud so you can help us all lead. It's one that Ruth really enjoyed. Amazing Grace. Let's sing together.
As you remain standing, in just a bit, I'm going to close with prayer, and then afterwards, we're going to invite the family to leave first, and then you can join us downstairs. Also, there's little cards out there in the lobby that you can write, and I think we're going to have some downstairs as well, but we're going to invite everybody to join for some cake and ice cream and coffee and fellowship after the service. But before we end, we pause. And while we celebrate the life of Ruth, it's also hard, and grief is a part of that. And when grief follows us like waves sometimes, a song, a place, a scent, may we embrace that as a meaningful part, and may we be reminded of the life of Ruth, the love and joy and courage that she shared. Would you join me as we pray? Creator, life of Ruth Lenz. Each of us are so grateful for the memories and the love that she shared. Each person here will be forever impacted by her life. We remember the way that she overcame adversity with grace and her faith, which was the foundation of so much of her life. May we have hope knowing she is celebrating with you, even while we grieve. And may we look forward to the day where we will one day be reunited. Until that day, help each of us to overcome the adversities in our own lives, even the pain and the loss of Ruth here on this earth with us right now. Help each of us to choose to become better with each passing day. Help us to learn to be like Ruth, to learn to rest into love and joy for as long as we live. We give you thanks. Amen. I'm going to invite you to have a seat while the family leaves first, and then we're all dismissed downstairs. You're invited to join us downstairs whenever you're ready.